Hey folks, Steve here with another Dark Valley video. Today should be at least turn 1, and we'll see how far we can get just in a single video. We'll work to move swiftly, though I think, again, I mentioned this in the previous video for the introduction and setup, that the first couple of turns will probably be slow, so I can kind of walk through different things as they're happening. The first couple of turns are going to be busy like that, and I want to make sure I explain things as I can as we go. A couple of go-backs from the last video. So I did get a couple of comments on Board Game Geek and in the comments section, and perhaps most importantly, I actually got directly messaged from, or got a direct message from Ted Racer himself on Board Game Geek. So Ted, thanks for messaging, and I appreciate you watching. I'm glad you're enjoying my videos for games that you've designed. And Ted was able to point out a couple of things that I'll bring up here that will help. Now, I maybe gave the impression last video that I didn't know. I'm not sure why people assumed this was the case. I can tell you that it wasn't, but some folks maybe got the feeling I didn't know there were a bunch of turn 1 special rules. Well, I do know that, and I didn't cover it in the previous video because it wasn't time yet, because we didn't cover turn 1. So rest assured, I'm aware of the various turn 1 special rules. We'll go into that here as we get started into the video. Ted pointed out a few things for us. So there was this question about this sort of area right in here where there's a border and a border, this sort of area here. Now, I was unsure what the game considered that region, because by this point, all of that was kind of controlled by Germany. Ted pointed out for us that technically that is considered Slovakia, which, yeah, that's the geographic regions of Slovakia. And it sounds like, in terms of in a political sense, it doesn't really matter that it's Slovakia, because the Germans can set up there if they want to. But that's why there's a country border. But just mechanically, it's controlled by Germany, so there's really no difference there. A lot of World War II games tend to just include that territory as part of like the German country outline. In this game, it just happens to not, but it didn't include a name for Slovakia here. So whatever, that works. So good to know. Thank you, Ted, for that. And then I did get one thing wrong with the counterattack. So this chit is meant to track the number of counterattacks that are needed. So what will happen, and I eventually realized this as I was reading the rules, but Ted pointed it out. So as we pull chits from the cup, the Soviets will get their, let's see if that will focus for you, counterattack chit. That will be in the cup. And how it works is when you draw it, you roll, I think it's 2d6, and that will tell you the number of counterattacks that the Soviets have to conduct. And when we roll the dice, we'll record however many it was on this track. So if it was, let's just say 7, I'd put that up here at 7. And then I guess probably the best way to leverage that is, as you conduct each attack that's required, you can move this down. So, okay, 6 more to go, okay, 5 more to go, 4, as you go through and make your attack. So corrected that much from the last video, or at least clarified what that is. The other thing he reminded, of course, this is just part of the turn 1 stuff. So again, I sort of already knew this, but this part of the front, basically the Odessa military district in Romania, we're not going to be able to really do anything for the first turn there. Not a big deal. Again, I'll go over this with the special turn 1 rules. Ted also pointed out that while these early turns, the Axis will probably very likely get 6-to-1 odds for combat, there's still a 50% chance of a retreat result rather than just defender eliminated. And we need to be careful of where we do our attacks in what order, because it could mean that a Soviet unit could retreat and end up retreating onto a rail hex that we need to have open for the supply units to advance. So that will be one thing. We can't just, I guess as the Axis here on our first combat, we can't just go, well, let's just attack everywhere and blow them all apart. what we really need to do is figure out the right combats to initiate to ensure that, yeah, we knock out some Soviet units, we advance, but that our supply depots can also advance after us. So I'll have to be careful as I conduct myself and watch out for that. I had read some of that online in my research, but Ted provided a nice reminder of that. And then Ted had also pointed out that for our first campaign game, if the Axis doesn't make their 29 victory points needed to continue, he suggests playing on anyway and subtract the difference at the end of the game to balance things out for the Soviets, because this is our first game, and not quite knowing the ins and outs and how to best use the Axis, we might actually fall behind there and miss our opportunity to win the game and have it end early. But I think that is tied up in the scenario rules for Barbarossa. Let me double check that. Yeah, I think that's related to the Barbarossa scenario, but I think that might count for the campaign game anyway. But I'm gonna just say we'll keep playing. Yeah, I mean we'll keep playing no matter what. I guess as long as it's not a true campaign automatic victory condition, we'll keep playing. That may cause some difficulties in 1942 for the Axis, but we'll do it up. So before we get into things, I would like to review those, what do you call it, special rules for the opening turn. So this game, at least the deluxe edition, does include a really fancy player aid chart. On here is additional rule reminders. This is the kind of thing I wish we had in the Dark Sands. So a lot of good, important little tidbits for various rule pieces so you can easily reference them. Right? And then on the back side, special rule reminders. These are the turn ones, for the most part. So you can see there's a bunch of good stuff here. And I'll just sort of read off the important ones that we need to know for at least the first turn. Some of these special rules go into turns 1 to 3, 1 to 7, 1 to 9. So I'll just refer to all of them now. So first, the special rules that are just for turn 1. So by default, we're going to get our combat followed by the move marker. And it looks like I may have misplaced a move marker somewhere, but I think it's supposed to be like so. So yeah, German combat phase followed by the movement phase. We understand that. No German air units during the initial combat phase. That's because they are busy destroying the Soviet Air Force. During the initial combat, Army Group North units may only attack Baltic Military District. Center goes for the Western, and Army Group South goes to the Kiev Military Districts. I've already mentioned that in the last video, so shouldn't be anything new there. German mechanized units treat swamps as forest for movement, so that's good. The swamps aren't so bad. German units ignore minor rivers and treat major rivers as minor. Well, for the first while here, most of the rivers up to a certain point are all minor anyway, so it's really only if we've progressed fairly deep will that matter and have the major rivers just turn into minor. All Axis units are in supply, so that's all for turn 1, so we can go kind of willy-nilly almost without worrying about supply. If we pocket Soviet units, only 1d6 of the in-supply Soviet units are eliminated per pocket in the logistics phase, so because turn 1 is representing a shorter amount of time, they don't all go poof, only some will go poof. No units may enter, move, or attack into or out of Romania, Hungary. So that is that sort of like, this whole part of the front is just sort of not active on turn 1. Then for the rules that are covering turns 1 through 3, our German motorized units defense is doubled in clear terrain. Our motorized units that attack in a clear terrain are doubled if they're attacking with the Panzer unit. And I did end up just a couple of very minor setup changes for the Germans up sort of north and in the center. I didn't do it for the south just because I didn't want to waste any more time, but north and center I made a few adjustments to make sure that some motorized units were actually stacked with some Panzer units to make use of that. If German mechanized units become out of supply, their movement points are reduced to 5, not 3, so that's pretty good. And the Soviets may not trace a line of communication or a line of supply through unoccupied hexes outside the USSR. So what that really means is the USSR can't even really invade anywhere and have supply unless it's like all the units that are forming their sort of chain into the enemy territory has Soviet units present. So I really don't think the Soviets are going to be making any progress in any enemy territory anyway, but they're going to have supply issues if they try anyhow. Then the last couple of special rules here. There's a special rule around the 1st Panzer HQ activation in Crimea. That won't be terribly relevant for a while. And then finally, for turns 1 through 9, the Soviets are going to use a certain combat results table, and that is going to be combat results table A. I'm not sure which is better, really. I was trying to look and figure out what the differences were, but I won't worry about it too much until we get into things. So those are all the special rules for turn 1 and a few turns after. There are some special rules that take place for turn 2, or that come into play on turn 2 and last for a while, but I'm not going to cover those until we start turn 2. If we do turn 2 in this video, cool, I'll talk about it then. If we don't make it to turn 2 in this video, then, I guess it'll be in the next video, right? So, okay, so I think we're good there. Probably the other thing that is worth talking about here, much like I did for the Dark Sands, I think it's a really good idea to review the action chits for the turn. So I'm going to take us off recording for just a second. I'm going to arrange what the remaining activation chits will be after this combat and move, so you can kind of see, just like we did with the Dark Sands, an analysis of what to expect for turn 1. So, 1 second. Okay, so I just threw the activation chits sort of down south on the part of the map, since the table's kind of cluttered at the moment with a lot of stuff. So, we had the German combat and move chits that are already on the track, since that's sort of by default. And then here's what's going to go into the cup and be randomized, and we won't know what will come up next. I guess, I'm assuming you watched my Dark Sands stuff, but if you didn't, the way this works is typically on a turn, one side has initiative. They get to pick one of their available activation chits from the schedule that's on a chart to play first, and then all the other chits available for the turn go into a cup. You pull the chit out, and you'll be able to take actions depending on what chit you draw, and then play just continues from there. Now, something that's different from the Dark Sands was that in the Dark Sands, you would basically have for each side up to 2 movements and 2 combats, 2 regular moves, 2 regular combats, besides any specialty chits. In the Dark Valley, it's a little bit different. So in the Dark Valley, while you can have specialty chits like these Panzer counters, you will only get 1 regular move and 1 regular combat per turn. In the Dark Sands, there was a limitation where one side can only have 2 consecutive chits at a time. In the Dark Valley, there is no such restriction. So, just as an example, if we drew it from the cup, the 1st Panzer, 2nd Panzer, 3rd Panzer, and 4th Panzer, all in a row, without ever drawing the Soviet chits, well, that's just bad news for the Soviets, I guess. So there's a lot more, I guess, a lot more randomness in what could happen, constrained by the fact that you're not going to get multiple moves for all of your units in a turn, again, except for the specialty chits. So on the rest of this turn, June 1941, the Axis gets activations for all of their Panzer headquarters, and then the Soviets get their counterattack and their move. So a move is pretty self-explanatory. The Soviets will get to move all of their units up to their movement rate, their movement allowance against the terrain they used to move through. What I will probably try to do is, as I move units, I will try to maybe cock them 90 degrees or something so that I know I've moved that one just because there's so many Soviet units, for instance, that I need to just validate which ones moved versus which ones did not move. The counterattack, in particular, is interesting. What it does is it's going to allow Soviet units to move and attack, but there's some special restrictions around that. I mentioned earlier, what we'll end up doing is rolling some dice to determine how many attacks are required. But when we actually activate these Soviet units to move and attack, I believe the restriction is that if you move a unit, it will have to try to attack. So you can't sort of double dip the chip, so to speak, as the Soviets and say, okay, well, I get a counterattack. I'm going to move a bunch of units, and I'm only going to attack with these ones. The way it works is that they may move units so as to attack with them and then conduct combat. Units which move must attack, and units which do not move may attack. So if you've already got a decent attack set up, those units can still attack, which is cool. Units which start adjacent to enemy units have their movement points reduced by 3. So it's almost a bad chit for the Soviets because what's going to happen is, we don't get any free moves. They have to attack. So obviously we'll try to find the best attacks available. But those attacks may end up, just because of how strong the Germans are, those attacks might be at really bad odds, and we may get a bunch of attacker losses. So right now, maybe in later turns, the counterattack chit could be very useful as the Soviets. On this turn, it's probably more of a detriment than anything, but we'll have to see what our possibilities are. There is a special restriction in this game that at first seemed kind of weird, but I get it. I get what they're going for. So there's a single unit rule for attacking, and basically if a unit is not, I guess I'd call it like a mobile unit, you can't just attack with a single infantry unit. It has to be 2 infantry units together, 2 non-motorized infantry units. So the way it's stated in the rules is that armored units, mechanized infantry, cavalry, mountain infantry, airdropping airborne, or invading Soviet naval units may conduct combat as a single unit. All other units must have at least 1 additional friendly ground unit involved in order to make an attack. So we won't be able to, for instance, do like suicide attacks with a single, 2-strength infantry rifle division as the Soviets, because you could, in theory, I guess, roll really well on the combat chart and force, maybe some losses on the Germans or something. It's more restrictive than that. That's a really big change than on the Dark Sands and probably most other war games that I've played. So I'm going to have to just watch myself and make sure that I do that appropriately. So units that, in my mind, seem fairly mobile, they're fine. If they're just infantry, rifle units, they must be attacking with fellow units, whether that be more foot infantry or other units. So basically this turn, it's just going to be very restrictive for the Soviets, as you would expect at the beginning of Barbarossa. The Panzer chits are kind of interesting. So what they can do is, basically you're activating a headquarters unit, and then units that are within the command range of the HQ can activate. But it's not like everything activates and can move and attack. It's a little bit different. So you can choose to combat, meaning combat with whatever units are in place, and then move. So the activated units, combat, move. That's almost a typical exploitation type of attack, right? You blow open a hole and you move through it. Pretty simple. Alternatively, you can move the activated units, and then mechanized units only may perform combat. So this is sort of get up to the front line. Get up to the front line and attack, but only those mechanized units. And of course, not every single unit is mechanized. Thus, it's very selective in nature. And that's it. So basically, what the flow of the turn probably will look like, I'll zoom out and just look at the map again. So what we should expect to have happen here in this turn, again, I'm taking my time because this is the first couple of turns. I want to get used to the rhythm. We should see Combats take place, a bunch of Soviet units eliminated, some advance after combats, and then a follow-up move where we'll probably encircle a bunch of Soviet units. And then from there, based on what the cut says, the Soviets are largely going to be either trying to form a new defensive line with their move, and then potentially doing some mandated counterattacking, which probably isn't good. So we're going to have to just be very careful in how we operate in that space. But meanwhile, as the Axis, somewhere sprinkled within that Soviet scrambling to form a new line and do limited counterattacks, sections of the German advance will seek to either destroy pocketed sets of enemies or surge forward and do some more reduced attacks with just those mobile units. So we could actually end up getting pretty far, but we need to keep in mind that after the end of the turn, all the Axis units won't be in supply, and what will really matter is that the supply depots can move as far as they can move. And just to think about how that's going to work, any units that surge forward will eventually have to count back so many hexes to those depots. Those depots right now are pretty much all along the front line, and at most, I think they can only advance 6 hexes on the map. So if you figure, just as an example, like over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that's as far as the depot could go. Similarly, we're probably looking somewhere along here. And then, depending on our line of supply, if we're making it to about here with the depots, if we're lucky, we might not even get that lucky, then units can maybe advance out to here-ish. I'm guesstimating it could be a little gnarlier than that. We might not even get that far with the depots just because we've got to clear the railways the whole way out. And the Soviets will obviously be aiming to retreat when they retreat, to retreat onto railway hexes. That seems to be an obvious thing to try to do here. So, with that in mind, we can start formulating what that attack plan is going to look like. And what I'll probably end up doing is just go from north to south and just work our way through that way. I guess before I do that, just probably worth pointing out what the sequence of play normally looks like. And they have a nice sequence of play on the back of the action chit availability chart. So ordinarily there would be reinforcement and replacement phase. So we would either get some reinforcements based on the turn, and we'd also get some replacements to replace lost steps or destroyed units. We'd move our air bases around. We'd potentially do some rail movement and naval movement, strategic movement. And then we would get into the action phase where we determine initiative. We pick the initial action chit that will be played as part of initiative. And then we just start pulling the rest of the chits, knowing that the logistics chit will be in here. And I guess that's another chit that I should have included in the description. If you watch my Dark Sands video, you know what that's about. Basically, every turn, the logistics chit will be in the cup, and when that is pulled, we will track supply. So it could be, just as a for instance, if we draw the logistics chit early, that could mean we could advance very, very far in a turn, figuring that on the second turn, until we draw that logistics chit, we don't need to worry about supply. That's where we can take on some risk. So it's, what action am I taking? Do I expect the logistics chit to come up, or did it already pass? That will actually have a big determination on our decision making. And then finally we get the attrition phase. So that's where we advance our Axis depots. We supply with air supply on certain turns if we need to. We get rid of some units based on being cut out of supply and being isolated. And then we do a victory check and advance the turn. So it's really pretty straightforward. I think the replacement and reinforcements will be interesting once we get there, because there's some special rules around that. Everything else is pretty straightforward, all things considered, so shouldn't be too bad. Okay, so that was a good amount of description and intro. I know I make long intros, but I think it's really important to describe these bits and pieces of the game so that you understand what I'm doing as I play. And again, as I do more and more stuff off camera, just knowing these basic mechanics will help you kind of understand what happens from turn to turn as I show the results of various combats. or the results of various turns as we get going. Okay, so I'm going to stop recording here. When we come back, I will start the process of attacking. We will probably start with Army Group North, and then again we'll work our way south down the line and seeing what combats we can take. I'm probably going to look at the example of play as sort of a guidance to see what are smart attacks to make, because I think the extended example of play in the playbook scenario book, does a pretty good job of showing an Axis advance. So I might rely on that just to get these opening combats well situated so we start off on a decent footing. Because I think after that, things should become a little more clear. The front line will have busted open, and we'll be in a little bit more maneuver combat. Where here, it's like, okay, where in the wall do you want to strike? That there's a lot here. I guess before I stop recording, I'll also point out, this is the bread and butter of the game. This is an operational game, all things considered. It's almost strategic level in some ways because you're going to decide what units to be replacing as the Soviets and a bunch of different things, but this is at its core an operational game. So the things that matter in your operational games are your maneuvering, your logistics, keeping your units near your HQs to perform the right combats at the right time, and finding the right force ratios to conduct the combats that are most beneficial to you. So, there's a lot here. There's a lot going on. There's going to be a lot of combat factor counting, but really that's what this operational tempo is going to be. We're really focused on that. That's where our decision making is. It's not, am I building a Marine unit? Am I building a tank corps or an infantry corps or whatever? It's with the forces that I have on the map, what can I be doing operationally to meet my goals? So yeah, all right, I'll take us off recording. We'll be right back. Okay, I lied. We're not going to go right into combat. I want to talk a little bit about the operational strategy for at least the first while of the game, because it's important that we talk about that, just so that folks kind of understand, like, what am I trying to do as I beat up on the Soviets as the Axis. And I'm speaking as the Axis perspective, speaking from that perspective, because they do have the initiative, the initiative and the tempo setting role for the first part of the game until the Soviets later get their heels on the ground and can start pushing back appropriately. So I also was off camera having a conniption fit because I thought, well, I nearly did lose a couple of counters. So somehow, some way, me walking around the room or recording another video for a different topic, I knocked some counters off the table, and they got kicked all over the place in my game room, and I was on my hands and knees trying to find the BP marker and that move chit over there. They got knocked off the table, and I had a heck of a time finding them. But I did find them. I was about to have a heart attack if I lost a chit. I'm that organized and crazy about organization that I would have just died if I lost a counter. Anyway, okay. So what are we trying to do? Well, as the Axis, we've got a couple of things that we need to be keeping in mind. So if we want to knockout win, and I don't know if this really represents the Axis winning the war in a conventional sense, but at least in terms of victory in the game, the Axis player can win the game if by the end of 1941 they control Moscow and either Leningrad or Kiev. Just to show what that would look like, we would need to be all the way up there, and for Leningrad, Moscow is right there, pretty far away, all things considered, and then Kiev is actually not too terribly far away over here. So if you control, Moscow in one of those in 1941, you win. Now, is it feasible to get there in 1941? Well, 1941 is the first 7 turns of the game. And the Axis has a fair number of movement and combat chits between now and the end of turn 7 that they could, in theory, win that way. Kiev isn't too terribly far from the starting point of Army Group South, so it is conceivable that they could take Kiev by the end of the year. Army groups north and center would have to be part of the drive in the north. And I guess what seems more reasonable to me is maybe, and this is speaking from inexperience, so I don't know, it could be easier to get to Moscow if Army Group North and Center really focus on getting to Moscow instead of Leningrad. We could even sacrifice advances towards Leningrad to focus on getting to Moscow. And if we're able to succeed in getting those, and it's, basically any turn before the end of 1941, so let's say, what if we could do it by October, then, we win automatic victory. Now, the problem with that, of course, is that on turn 4, we have mixed weather. Turn 5 is mud, turn 6 is mixed mud, and then turn 7 is, snow. And so the weather is going to act against us. So we really only have a few turns of really good weather to get that far. If we focused on getting all the way to that point, what we may be sacrificing is our overall victory point count. Now, at the beginning of the game, the Axis has 14 victory points. So we have our victory point marker on the force space flipped over to the plus 10 side, so that means 14. And if you were to count all the victory hexes over here, you would find 14. So there's a number of them all over the place over here, right? I did count them. It is 14. So we don't want to miss our opportunity to get victory points, but what the other consideration is, well, we could win an automatic victory by having 38 victory points. I would imagine, just based on count, that 38 victory points is the vast majority of the map. So, yeah, possible, but we won't get that. It wouldn't be probably until 42 or 43 that we accomplish that goal, I would imagine. And then the other option is sort of the Southern Oil Fields victory, which means focused down here amongst all this beautiful clear terrain, and there we would need to control Sevastopol, Stalingrad, Maikop, and Grozny, and exited 10 or more German units, at least 5 of which must be mechanized, off the south map edge in the Caucasus, and that represents capturing Baku oil fields. So we could try to focus on that goal. And it is possible, it is conceivable that we could try to win doing something like that. Now, again, we sort of would be, I imagine we'll have to decide this later and see how the game goes and see what our options are. Those are all ways for the Axis to automatically win. Once we're on the tail end of things, then it's going to be the Soviets who can win potential automatic victories, and how they do that is reducing the German VP by certain turn thresholds. And the Germans can then sort of win a game victory by saying, well, we managed to hold the Soviets back for time well enough to win by game standards. But of course, most of these victory conditions that aren't the German automatic victory conditions are at best saying, well, Germany did slightly better than history, and that's a victory by game standards, I guess. So we'll have to see. If we do very well as the Axis, and we've managed to push very far, and we can entertain the idea of a 1941 automatic victory, it might be worth it. But again, we might be sacrificing our overall strategic situation by doing so, by having such constrained operational objectives. If instead we maybe just tried a more methodical approach and just capturing what VPs we can every turn, and not worrying so much how far we are from Moscow, that might work. But it's really tough to say. I don't know what the turn's going to look like, but I want you, the viewer, to understand that's what I'm going to be trying to think about as the Axis make these advances. What is the situation developing to be for our objectives, and what are we going to shoot for? Obviously, for the longest time, the Soviets are just going to be trying to hold back the Axis onslaught, so forming strong defensive lines somewhere along the way when we can bring our units retreating and forward to some line using rivers and whatnot, historical lines of defense, to try to put as much defense in front of the Axis as possible. But again, for the first probably half of the game, the Soviets are going to be in the reactive mode, not necessarily have any clear operational objectives. It'll be mostly in the seat of the Axis for that. So, okay, when we come back, I promise, this time we will look at combats. Okay, here we are looking at sort of the northern half of Army Group North, more or less than the northern half. I've sort of moved the camera off to the side so I can kind of get us situated to see a little bit better. The map is so big that having my camera in the usual place the entire time probably won't work. We'll need to kind of shift things around a little bit. So we're going to start our attacks here, and I'm going to just, what I'm probably going to do to start with is just follow, like I said, the extended example of play. My unit setups are probably going to be a little bit different and slightly different, but I think it will be sufficient to get the ball rolling, and we'll just accept what happens. So, so keeping that in mind, I think I will end up having the attacks go following the extended example of play. Just my hex attacking that hex. So even if my combat factors are probably slightly different, the units are slightly different, we're at least going to follow the pattern of hexes that we're opening up. Something worth noting is that the Axis player, really both players, when they're doing combat rounds, don't have to do attacks in any specific order. They can go in any order that they want to. And on top of that, the Axis can actually, the Axis and the Soviets, both sides can pick and choose combats as they go. So they don't need to say, here are all of my attacks, I'm going to label them all, and then we'll initiate them. I can attack in one place and then decide, wow, that attack went really well. It'd be great if I also attacked here. I can then choose to attack in that second location, but if that first attack doesn't go the way I want, I don't have to attack in that second location. I can just attack somewhere else if I want to. So in some other games, you have to declare all of your attacks first. In this one, you don't have to. The rulebook specifically says you don't have to announce combats ahead of time. So as the Axis, we'll work sort of a north to south fashion, but again, I'll keep to the extended example of play, and we'll try to think about where it would make sense to attack next. So with the extended example of play, they had it that this hex here attack here, and I think that sounds like a glorious idea. So when we look at what's here, we have a Panzer division, a motorized division, a infantry corps, and our other, let's see if we get that on camera properly, our other motorized. Now, this unit projects a zone of control, so does the Panzer, and we've got plenty of motorized units here that are supported by the Panzer, and what that should mean is that they're motorized units attacking in a clear terrain. They have double attack factor because this hex that we're attacking right here, you can just barely see it, is clear. It's shaded because it's showing the Baltic military district. So I can tell you just right away that that's going to be a 6-to-1 odds combat. And if I try to look, we are going to be on combat results table A. We're rolling on the 6-to-1 chart, and I will roll a gray die off camera, I guess, since it's kind of congested here, to see what we get. So fingers crossed we roll well. So rolling the gray die. Well, I rolled a 1, which is a defender retreats star. So if it had 2 or more steps, it would take a step loss. But since it is only 1 step, that unit gets to retreat, which amusingly is pretty much what happens in the example of play. So this unit has to retreat 2 hexes, and if we follow the retreat compass, we'll retreat back to that hex there. So I guess so much for that. I would have thought that would have gone a little bit better, but such is life, I guess. Now, we can advance after combat. In the example of play, they leave Memel ungarrisoned, and I don't know if that is the right thing to do here. I honestly have no idea. I don't know what the dangers are of that. Because what I suspect is going to happen is that well, I just don't know. I just don't know what the right move is there for that. I kind of want to leave a unit behind, but I don't know. It looks like in the example of play, he does end up putting a unit in there somewhere, though I'm unsure how. I guess it's with the movement after combat. So we will advance the whole stack into the hex. No big deal. Okay, so our second attack is going to be with our big, gigantic Wonkin stack here. And it looks like the example play has them attacking this clear terrain hex on the rail line. You can't quite see it, but it's right here. Now we have plenty of combat ability in here. We have our supply depot in the HQ, but otherwise we have, I'm not going to be able to get this on camera, but we have 2 4-6 infantry divisions and a motorized corps and a tank corps. So that's going to be 8, 12, 20. Yeah, we're going to be on the 6 to 1 chart. Absolutely, no doubt about that. And we're going to roll the die again. And we'll see what we get. Hopefully this will be something better than a 1. Okay, I rolled a 5. So that is much better. I believe a 5 is defender eliminated. Okay, so let me just get this out of the way. Defender eliminated goes into the eliminated box. First real casualty of the East Front. And then it looks like what did they end up advancing into the hex? Interesting. I don't know if this is optimal, but the example of play only has an HQ and 1 unit advancing. I don't know why you wouldn't, because I think ideally you would want to move everything and then have more movement. So I guess what I will do different is I will move forward the HQ. I will leave 1 infantry behind, and I will move the rest of them forward. That way we have an extra hex to work with from a moving standpoint. Okay, then they have the attack with this hex attacking here, which is a forest hex. And I think this may be a trouble area for me because my setup... Oh no, it's very similar to their setup. Interesting. Okay. We're going to ignore the minor river. We are attacking forest terrain. So let me get this a little bit... It's really hard to see, unfortunately, where we're at, but it's this hex that we're attacking, and it has a forest on the other side of the river. Now, a forest hex for terrain, where it's woods, is each Panzer and tank unit is -1 combat factor. Well, we actually don't have any of those in the hex that's attacking, so we have infantry infantry, and infantry. So that's 6 to 1 odds. Recurring theme here. We'll roll the die. And we rolled a 4. 4 on the combat results table here is, an EX. Ugh. Defender eliminated, attacker loses equal number of steps. Alright, well, we will eliminate this unit. We're going to have to eliminate a step. Now, I believe when it comes to eliminating steps, if there are 2 step units present in the stack, they have to take a step loss before you eliminate any single step units. I'm reasonably confident that that's the case. Yes. Okay, so what can we do here? Okay. Interesting. I'm going to advance everybody, but our infantry division took a step loss and, unfortunately, loses its Zoc. So we're going to be relying on other units to project the Zoc into the other hexes, and that could be a real problem for us later down the road. And amusingly, I think on that roll in the example of play, they got a DE result, so they did well. We didn't do as well, which is a bummer. That's a bummer. Okay. So what else? Looks like there's an attack here next by example of play, and so we would have 4, 5, only 6 combat factors against 2. Well, that's 3 to 1 odds. Ugh. I don't know if we want to do that. What's the 3 to 1 odds look like? We could force a retreat. They would have to retreat through enemy zone of control. Let's do it. We got to be risky, right? We got to be risky. So this is 3 to 1 odds. Oh God, I rolled a 1. AL1. So we take a step loss as the axis. Oh no. Oh gosh. Well, that did not go to plan at all. That was bad. That was bad. That was actually real bad, all things considered. I mean, that just was not. That was not what we wanted to have happen. That much I can tell you. Okay, and then the next attack they have an example of play is here. This is throwing us on the 6 to 1 chart. We will roll the die here. We roll defender eliminated. So this unit is eliminated. And let's see how much we want to advance after combat. I think we probably want to do a fair number here. Let's see. I think we'll go ahead and just advance everything into the hex. And that's another Soviet unit gone, but man, that last combat really bums me out. Gosh. Let's see, any other attacks with the north that we want to make? Get a little bit of crossover with some Army Group North units, but we will attack that hex at 6 to 1 odds with the remaining Army Group North units, and there goes another exchange result. Let's see, can we... Nope, I'm going to have to take it from this unit here. Well, that's fine. It's getting a little congested. Okay, well, that's not good. Due to some unfortunate rolls, we did not get nearly as far as I think we would have wanted to for our Army Group North attacks, which is a bummer. That's a bummer. The movement part's going to be important here, but well, what really is unfortunate is that when we took the losses and we took them with the two-step units, we lost our Zocs. So we're not going to be able to probably cut off as many units as we would like without just fully surrounding the enemy. So there's a cost there. But that was all the units for Army Group North, because they all had to attack the Baltic military district. So now we'll look at attacks that are going to go to the Western military district. So just down here, we will have Army Group Center in this sort of salient go next. But I'm going to take us off recording because this is I need a little bit of a break for a second, and then we'll be back. All right, we're going to get into Army Group Center's attacks. And we're going to have our first attack in a space that actually has some combat die roll modifiers. So we're still sort of following the extended example of play order of operations. And what we're doing is we're attacking Grodno here. Now, a couple of things that are different from the extended example of play. In the example of play, the unit there is a 2-4 unit. So we only have a 1-4 unit. Because we're attacking a town, that's going to add 1 combat factor to the unit. That makes its combat factor 2. We'll zoom in a little bit more so you can get there. This is a 2. And then because we're attacking a fortified zone, which is, it's on the map, they also, in this edition, give you counters to help make it obvious that it's there. Also shifts the odds 1 column to the left. Now, the attacking units are this stack, and it comes out to be 15 combat factors. Because this is considered non-clear terrain, we don't get to double our combat factors. So we're simply going to be going in with 15. 15 to 2 is 7 to 1 odds, which goes down to 6 to 1 odds, which is reduced to 5 to 1 odds. So not quite as good as we would want it to be. But I do roll a 5 on the die roll, and that is a EX result. Gosh, these damn EX results. So, this unit is eliminated. I believe the fortified zone is removed. I'm pretty sure it's removed, so we'll move it out of the way here. And then... let's see. We'll advance everything into Grodno, I guess. But we have to take a step loss. We'll take a step loss to the infantry unit. And they advance. So maybe it might have been better to have some of those folks elsewhere. Tank units so they can make use of clear terrain, but we're more using them to get into a better position for later combats, I think. At least that's how it's going in my mind. Whoops, didn't mean to bump that there. Okay, so next combat. Well, there's another fortified hex here, and it's not in a town, so this will be probably 5 to 1 odds, and we would be attacking probably from this hex here, so I'm not sure if that counts as clear or not. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know if it would be, but it's only, it doesn't really matter if the combat factors are doubled here because we've got such overwhelming force because it's already 5, 6, 7. Yeah, it's a huge amount. So that would take us to 6 to 1 odds, which is reduced by the fortified zone to 5 to 1 odds. 5 to 1 odds, we roll the die, and we get a 5, which I believe, I think I just rolled that, is, yeah, EX. I don't really like these EX results, but, you know, we'll deal with it. So this unit is eliminated. I believe the fortified zone goes away as well. And we need to take a step loss. And unfortunately, I think this is going to have to be from the tank unit. Yeah, because... and that means that we're going to lose our Zoc. That's a shame. And yeah, I think we just advance everything. We advance everything in. Yeah, bummer. Okay, and we're going to just continue sort of mirrored down on the south part of the salient. So we're going to leave these guys alone because they're probably just going to be encircled here. We're going to have this fortified hex here attacked. And similarly, we're talking 1 combat factor, way more than enough to get us over the hump, so to speak, for combat factors. So it is a 5 to 1 result. We're going to roll the die. Only rolled a 3 that time on the 5 to 1, which is a defender retreats and a star. So he's going to have to retreat, and the retreat compass, I guess we go like that. This is going to be gone. At least we didn't take a step loss, so there's that. And we'll just send everybody, including the HQ, into the hex, like so. Seems to be the right move there. And then we have some other attacks that, again, based on the example of play, are more down here. And it looks like we're going to have these 3 stacks attack basically outward, is what it looks like. So let me get this camera positioned a little bit better. There we go. Okay. Okay, so this is a 2 unit, and we want to attack there. It's going to be 6. Unfortunately, we're going to lose a combat factor on our Panzer. So it's 2 against, we got 6, 8, 11. So 11 to 2 is actually 5 to 1. We'll roll the die. I got another 3. So that's defender retreats. And yeah, so I'll move him back that way. Here is 2, 4, 6. So 6 to 1 odds. Yeah, 6 to 1 odds. 6 to 1 odds on the 4 is an EX result. I don't like these EX results. They're kind of a bummer. And do we even have a 2-step unit? We don't. Okay, so we actually lose a whole unit, which is a bummer. But then the rest of these guys I will have advance. Now the problem is we don't have the Zocs, so I guess it's kind of important that we get this stack. So this is Oh, interesting. So this is Brest-Litovsk. So this is 3 combat factors. They get an extra one in an odd shift, and he's going to be attacked by 6, 7, 8. So 8 to... Ooh, this is not good. I probably... Ooh, yeah. 8 to 3 is not good. That's really only 2 to 1 odds. And then it becomes 1 to 1 odds due to the fort. So I don't think we would want to attack there. And unfortunately, we just don't have a combat that makes sense otherwise. And that's the last stack of Army Group Center units on our first pass. Now we can take a second pass along the line, and it does look like the example of play has a couple of different attacks that they want to do. Yeah, it looks like they're trying to close some of the pockets just automatically in some of these attacks. So if I look here in the example of play, they want to attack here with these units. Now there aren't Zocs that are closing up the situation, so it could mean this unit just gets away. So we have, and we're attacking Forest, so 3, 7, 9, 13 to 2. Well, 13 to 2 is 6 to 1 odds. We roll the die. 5 on 6 to 1 is, I'm pretty sure, defender eliminated. It is. So we eliminate this one. This one's a non-replaceable unit, so we will put him off to the side, and we'll have these units advance after combat. So that was good. What else? And then they have sort of closing attacks on the 2 that are left. And it looks like the way they've done it is having this stack and this stack go here. That's fine. So we would have 5. Well, we could actually probably do a little bit better than that. I realize I never had this stack attack at all, I don't recall. So maybe what we do here is 5 and this unit attack here. That's 6 to 1 odds. We get a 4, so 6 to 1. Yeah, exchange. What a bummer, man. Ugh, God. So we're losing our Zocs. This is the real problem. So we'll just move all these units in, and then here we have more than enough to be 6 to 1 odds with the remaining units in those hexes. We rolled a 6, so at least these guys are eliminated. And we'll advance after combat. We'll do that. Okay. We reduced that salient, but not as much as we probably would have liked to, all things considered, but it's not bad. Okay, I think that does it for Army Group Center, so we will take a break, and we'll look at Army Group South next. There's a fair amount of action here that could take place. Now, one of the things that's going to be a challenge for us is that Army Group South can activate, I believe, this turn, but the example of play doesn't show this, so we're going to have to make our own decisions on where to attack in Army Group South. Do you think we can do it, guys? Do you trust me? Do you trust me? I'm going to take a break. I'm going to take a look at the overall situation, and we'll come back and we'll start the attacks in just a second. So we'll see you in a second. Okay, so I think I've got the camera centered around our Army Group South situation. We've got some units down sort of to your view, the right off in the Carpathian Mountains, which I don't think it makes any sense to try to activate them to attack, so they won't. But I think just all along the main line that you see on screen here, we'll be looking at various attacks. A pattern that I saw in the extended example of play was that it seemed like maybe it was, they would attack every other hex, and then if those attacks went okay, then they maybe considered attacking the in-between hex that was left over. And I probably didn't make the right decisions for where I attacked next and where I could attack, but that's just the way it goes. So we'll look through here at the Army Group South setup. So what I think I'm going to do, the attack that could happen here is not good enough. We'd only have 3-to-1 odds, so this guy is just not doable. This guy is more doable because we can do 2 hexes to 1 combat. So I think that's what we'll do. So this will be 6 combat factors here, 6 combat factors here, attacking across the Null River in the forest. The forest won't have any effect here, so it's really 6-to-1 odds, as good as they can get. And we rolled a 1. Alright, defenders got to retreat, so they would do that, I guess, and stay on the rail line. And I think then we would have these units advance. Then we'd have here, now it is the fortified zone. Let me fix these counters. We would have 4, 8, 12. So it'd be 5-to-1 odds. We'll roll it. I rolled a 1. Both sides lose a step. Alright, well, that is the way it goes. But I believe we can advance after combat anyway, so we'll take a step loss. But we'll advance everybody after combat. Actually puts us kind of in a tough situation. It's here that's like, okay, where does it make sense to attack? Because we can really only get at one of these stacks, I think, with the right amount of force. Yeah, that's a problem. So we have 7 combat factors. Either one of these in a vacuum would be fine to attack. We are in danger of losing a Zoc, though. So we'll attack here, and it's going to end up being 5-to-1 odds just due to the fortified zone. Alright, we got a 5, and a 5 is an EX. Dang, that's really not what we want to be happening. We want to get those really good results, but we're not getting them. So we lose our Zoc, and I think because of that, I think I might have bungled this one up real bad. I'm going to leave this unit here, and yikes. Let's see, our problem is we have a supply depot, and it needs to go through this, this rail line, but now we already attacked. We aren't going to be able to clear it. Shit. Yeah, not good. Okay. Alright. Well, that's fine. That's fine. We still have some better opportunities if we can activate our Panzer. stuff. So we'll take it in stride here. Okay, so we went here. I guess the next obvious attack would be from here to here, and that would be 5, 6, 10 combat factors to 3, or to 1 rather, or a lot. So maybe it's 6 to 1 odds. We got 3. 3 is a retreat. So they will retreat, and there's no Zoc, so they'll plant themselves right there, and these guys advance after combat. And I'm pushing all my counters out of the way, unfortunately. There we go. Get them in there. Okay. Then down here, I think we will attack Presmissile. And we've got 8, 9, 10, 12. Yeah, so it's going to be 5 to 1 odds here. Again, we shift a column because of the fortified zone. And oh, thank goodness, we get Defender eliminated. So that much is at least covered. And I guess we just advance everybody. Okay, now, where else did we not attack? So we have an attack here, we have an attack here, basically. We've already got problems with our supply depot, so I think it doesn't hurt to try to knock out these fortified zones. And we've got enough units we could take step losses if we had to. So, it'll be on the 5 to 1 odds chart. Oh, come on. Alright, so that is a Defender retreats. So we'll get that out of the way, I guess. Trying to look, see here. Yeah, okay. And then finally we have this sort of remaining fortified zone that we can hit with 2, 4, 8. Yeah, 8. This becomes 5 to 1 with the fortified zone. Ah, we rolled a 1. Both sides lose a step. Okay, so this unit is eliminated. We lose the fortified. We need to take a step loss from our Zoc projecting unit. We will advance with the, well, I guess we won't advance with the HQ because I don't want to, I want it to be following up on the rail line. Well, I don't know. I'll go ahead and advance the HQ. Ugh. And okay, so that's all the attacks. Those are the attacks that we managed to get done. I don't think we did very well. I don't think we did as good as we could have, but those die rolls didn't help a whole lot, honestly, either. Now, I guess the one good thing is we knocked some of those fortified zones out, and once they're gone, I believe they're gone. Let me do a quick double check of that in the rules. I'm reasonably confident that that is the case. Pretty certain. I just gotta find them in the rules somewhere. Somewhere in here. Yeah, they're eliminated if Axis units enter the hex. They're also eliminated if at the end of any attrition segment they are unoccupied by Soviet combat units and cannot trace a line of communication. Okay. Okay, so for whatever fortified zones we knocked out, they were knocked out. And now we get the Axis move. Now, like I've said, there's a couple of places on the rail lines where the attacks didn't do as well as we could have, and we've got some blocked up spaces to deal with. It's not going to get any better for us there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take us off recording, because I've already recorded just a lot of footage. This is going to be, turn one's going to be its own video at this point, just because of how much has been going on. I'm going to do all of the axis movement off camera, and then when we come back, movement will be complete, and we can start drawing from the cup. Again, this is going to be probably a pretty long video for turn 1. I will cut some of this other stuff down to size and go into turn 2 and so on. But that's as good as we can do right here at the moment. So I will be back. Okay, so here we are after the initial move. You know, as I was going through this, and I was going through the combats, you know, last section of the video and the movements here, I'm really, I realize I'm stressing myself out probably too much for a game. I just need to chill out. But I'm stressing out because I don't want to make mistakes. I'm so worried about making optimal moves, especially this first turn where, you know, the axis has its greatest momentum to be punching through, and I just don't know. I just don't know how well I'm doing. So let's take just a look at the situation as is. So in the north, I've situated my Zoks to be a problem for most of the Baltic military district. I also cut some units around. The interlocking Zoks have pretty much cut most of it off, I think. So by the time the... actually, I just realized I might have a problem. Do I have any Zoks? I don't have any Zoks right here. So in theory, these guys come down and screw with that guy. So I need to make a slight adjustment. Dang it. I think I'm doing this unit. Well... yeah, okay, that technically works. I can do that. All right. Like I said, trying to figure it all out. Very tough. I'm trying to take it easy, but it is stressful to figure out, like, what am I doing here? I don't want to screw up the rest of the game by not performing well on this first turn. But I shouldn't worry too much about it. It is just the way the game is going to go. So I think most of the military units of the Soviets in the Baltic are surrounded. So Army Group North is doing fairly well there. When it comes to Army Group Center, they too have isolated, for the most part, most of the units of the Western Military District. I'm reasonably confident that I've done that. There might be a couple of places... no, I think we're okay. It's just, you know, I didn't want to spring too far forward, but it should be enough that a lot of these units are either out of supply or are isolated. So we should be okay from that perspective. I maybe could have moved further out with some of my units, but I really want to make sure that the movements I'm making keep my momentum from getting screwed up, and that units can't escape. And then, obviously, we had some trouble in the south, which is a real big bummer in terms of the combats. I did surge some units forward, and at least for the moment, you know, we were able to isolate some units. We've sort of got an arm that's swinging to cut some of these guys off eventually. But it was just kind of tough, and it's especially tough because the rail line that we need to be clear for our supply unit is clogged up right now, and we need to clear that hopefully over the next couple of activations that come out of the chit box to clear these out. That's the real key, I think, that needs to happen. So what I'm hoping happens now is that when we go to pull the chits, if we're fortunate enough to pull the Panzer chits early, what we can, or maybe we want the logistics chit to come up early. If the logistics chit comes up, a lot of these guys are going to go, a lot of the Soviets are going to go out of supply. Then we pull the Panzer chits, which should allow us to activate enough units to do the combat and then move. So the combats will clear a bunch of units, and then the move will allow us to once more surge forward yet again, and then surround even more units for the future turn. So we could get, what I'm hoping happens if we're able to. I don't know that we will, but what I'd like to be able to do is get a line from Riga on down. If we can get like roughly there, down south is where our advance is. I guess I'd be somewhat happy with that. That would at least make me feel like we've made some progress, but it's really going to depend on how these other activations go and how we work it. So with that, I think we can go to the cup. So I will grab my randomizer cup. I will throw in the logistics chit, these 2 Soviet counters, and the 1st through 4th Panzer activation chits. We'll shake it up, and we'll draw. And I'll say that, whatever we draw next, all the other Axis activations will be very localized, so it should be easy to run through the activation. So pull in the next chit, and that next chit is the 4th Panzer. So I will put this chit on the chart there, and where is the 4th? That maybe is the real question. Okay, so this is a north activation up in the Baltic. So just to show kind of where the HQ is, it's right here. I didn't move it any further forward. I should probably double check the locations of all of my HQ units just so I know where they're at, because I would hate to be royally screwed over. 3rd Panzer's here. 1st Panzer's down here, potentially out of supply if it weren't the first turn. And then 3rd Panzer. I need to find the 2nd Panzer. I don't know what I did with it. Might have to look to see where it's normally set up. Anyway, okay, I'm going to consider what we're going to do with this activation, and we'll be back. Okay, I want to talk about this activation quickly. I did end up finding my other missing headquarters unit, and I put the headquarters on top of the stacks so that they're a little bit easier to find, hopefully, in the future. Okay, so the way that this works is we're going to be activating units within 3 hexes of the 4th Panzer HQ. That's the number in brackets on the HQ counter you can see in the center of the screen. Apparently, that command range is regardless of intervening units, at least according to the glossary at the beginning of the rule book. So if I read that correctly, and I hope I am, and if I'm wrong, hopefully someone can tell me. But I believe that means that, for instance, that black counter up there, the Totenkampf, I think that might be, motorized unit up there, is 1, 2, 3 hexes away from the HQ. It doesn't matter that there's all those Soviet units in between, but all that doesn't matter as long as it's within 3 hexes, if I'm reading the rules right. So that unit, for instance, can be activated and can go. So that basically means in a 3-hex bubble around that HQ, units can activate. So it's pretty good that, I guess, most of these units here in Army Group North, not all, but most, are within the command range of the HQ, which should mean we can activate plenty and do either the move and attack or attack and move. I think what I want to have happen here, and this could be suboptimal play, I just don't know. I think I may want to have them attack, so that when they attack, we can clear these units, and then they get a move afterwards. And the attack means that everybody in command range can attack, not just the mechanized units. So we clear some of these units and then we move. And we might be able to snatch that victory hex to the north right up there. We could do that if we send a unit surging up after combat. So I think we need to look at that. Because we still have a pretty wide reach for these units, I think it's worth figuring out what we want to do here. And knowing that with the activation chits, whatever is left over at the end of this activation will be all the activity the Axis will have with Army Group North, because the other HQs are all further south and we're not going to get any more activations. So we need to situate ourselves in a way that will benefit us for the end of the turn, namely to make sure that our supply unit is able to move forward. So there could be some points here where I didn't move optimally, but you live and learn, like I did in the Dark Sands. I didn't have everything right there, and we played through it, and we won't have everything right here, and we'll play through it. So I'll be right back after I complete the activation here. I'm just going to do the combats, and I'm going to do the movement. You'll see the aftermath. Hopefully we should see some cleared Soviet units. Okay, whoops, left one. Take that off. I use the there's act chits you can use to put on units that have actions to take. Especially with these certain activation chits, only so many units got to activate. So it actually went reasonably well. We were able to knock out some units and cleared the way, and we're able to advance toward Riga. So that was actually pretty good. That black counter swept up around and grabbed that victory point, so we increased our victory point count to 15. We are still, I believe, cutting these other units out of supply there, the remnants of the Baltic military district, so to speak, or the main remainder, and then the rest of these are still kind of cut off. We were able to move some units up. We couldn't activate everything, and I'm actually, in retrospect, I maybe don't have the best positioning for my HQ unit, but you know what? That's okay. We'll work to resolve that in time. So yeah, that went pretty well. All things considered, we were able to move forward a bit. We destroyed some units. Several are still going to be out of supply when the chits come up. Now we do have right now a couple of lost units for the Axis. So we lost a single-step division. Single-step division, and then we lost a two-step corps so far. But if we look at the losses for the Soviets, there's a whole mess there and a couple of non-replaceables. So I think the Axis is doing well from that perspective, I guess, all things considered. But I really don't want to be losing any units if I can help it. Okay, well, we're going to go back to the cup, and we will pull. I think the logistics chit would be great right now. Okay, and we pulled, the Soviet move marker. Okay, so this is a regular move. Now the Zoks are going to prove to be a problem for the Soviets because they can't get out of enemy zones of control. You can't move from one enemy zone of control to another enemy zone of control. There's an exception for Axis Panzer units, but Soviets aren't Panzers. And we did pretty good coverage with the Zoks, so at most what we're probably going to see happen is that the Soviets are going to try to create some sort of line of defense. That's probably the best they can hope for at this point, with many units that have been cut out of supply, pretty much a lost cause, but we'll have to see how that goes. Now, because this is a general move, it essentially means I get to move every single Soviet unit on the map that isn't locked in a Zok lock. So it's going to take a while, and it's going to be very boring to show on camera, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to take us off recording. It's going to take a little while for me to do it. To you, it'll be just an instance, hopefully. But I'm going to take the time to move all of the Soviet units, and we'll be back when that is complete. Hopefully what you should see at that point is some sort of line that is defensible. So we'll have to see what that ends up looking like. It won't be a fully formed line, I suspect. So, okay, we'll be back. Okay, so here we are after the move. You can sort of see I'm starting to create some lines. And the trouble is knowing, by the time it matters, will these lines be out of position? So really all that these are just trying to get the units their furthest move that makes sense, to create some semblances of a defensive line. Now, they're not all in the perfect position, so I think ideally some of these units should be, you can kind of see, like, I'm beyond the Moscow defensive works, but I guess I can fall back later. I'm not sure. So I just moved units as far up as I could just to kind of see where everybody's at. And then in some cases, I'm not even really using all the rivers yet as the really good defensive terrain. But some of this was just to get them out of their starting locations and into something that can represent some sort of defensive series of defenses. I can't move anybody in Odessa, which was kind of a challenge, but we did have units that were in the Kiev military district that were stuck up in the mountains. They're trying to pull out before the door shuts behind them with those Axis Panzer, but it's tough going through that mountainous rough terrain, and they just aren't moving quickly enough. Everything that was sort of in the very front line here is trapped, and I can't get them out. So that's a bummer. Even this unit over here is essentially trapped and can't move. So while there are units nearby that might be able to help support, this was as good as I could get in a single turn's worth of movement. Now, when they do the move, I couldn't use rail movement. That's strategic movement. So there was a bunch of like swampy woods terrain that some of these units were trying to trudge through, and a lot of them only had 4 movement points. So they simply couldn't get very far, unfortunately. So that's as good as we could get. So now we're going to go back to the chit. Again, the Soviets now only have one more activation chit that they can use, and that would be the counterattack. And we know that counterattack right now, maybe not terribly useful. We might be able to snipe out some lonely tank units if we can get enough force projection to launch the attack. So here we go back to the cup. The Axis, I think, would love logistics right now because they're in supply due to special rule, but we've got a bunch of these remaining pockets that would be cut out of supply and thus easier to reduce. So we'll see. So pulling the next chit, and it is 1st Panzer. 1st Panzer. And the 1st Panzer is down here in the south somewhere. I think that may have been the one unit I didn't... there it is. Okay, so the 1st Panzer is going to be activated. Again, we get an activation bubble of 3. So everywhere... Unfortunately, I might have moved too far out ahead. So we would get this unit, these units, 1, 2, this unit, 1, 2, these units. Yeah, it's not quite as good. 1, 2, and this unit. So we were able to get some units. 1, 2, 3. We could get some of those guys up there. So it's not a perfect situation, unfortunately. So we will try to, I think we're going to try to do, again, combat and then move. And what we're probably going to look at doing then is remove these units, maybe attack this unit if we can. I'm not sure we're going to have enough combat factors to do it, but certainly I think we're going to aim at taking out these 2 stacks, maybe take out that mechanized unit, and then go from there. And of course, oh my gosh, oh no, oh gosh, I need to go see about the air units. I might have been able to use an air unit back when we activated the 4th Panzer. So I may need to go back and correct that and take some action with the air units. I'm going to have to double check the rules on that because we couldn't activate air units in the first combat round, but with these Panzer activations we do. So the question is, are we allowed to use the air forces down here in Army Group South? If so, we'd probably try to take out, just to show, like, okay, we're going to activate Probably wasn't showing it on camera properly. So we're going to activate some units right around here with the 1st Panzer. If we can knock out this mechanized unit with air, that will actually be an improved situation for us to hit some other hexes, clear out what we can clear out, and then move forward again. So, yeah, all right. I'm going to take us off camera. I'm going to go read up on the air bombardment rules to see if we should have gotten one for the 4th Panzer. If we did, then I'm going to use the 4th Panzer to do some attack somewhere. And I won't try to overcorrect. I'll just, if I can get an attack, I'll launch the attack. And then we'll similarly do this for the 1st Panzer if we're able to use the air or not. It might matter whether or not the air bases are in range of the HQ. I don't know. I'll have to look it up. So we'll be right back in just a moment. Okay, so time to correct some mistakes. So when we had the 4th Panzer activation, every air unit could go if it wasn't attacking, as long as it didn't bombard an attack that was being, as long as it didn't bombard a hex that was being attacked, we should have gotten all sorts of airstrikes possible back when we did the 4th Panzer Corps. So what I'm going to do as a correction is I'm going to do a round of air missions as if we were doing the 4th Panzer. We're only going to, by default, since we already did the combats for the Baltic anyway, whatever they're going to target will be a unit that we didn't attack before anyway. And then even the air units that are with Army Group Center in the south will get to go for the 4th Panzer. And then when we actually do the 1st Panzer, those air units may actually get to go again. Now, the only challenge is when you do an air bombardment, if you roll a 1 through 3, that air unit is done for the turn. So we're going to do the 4th Panzer activation runs. If any of these units become done, they won't get a second opportunity when we do the 1st Panzer activation. So I'm just going to get this out of the way very quickly right now. So for the 1st activation here, we would target this unit in this hex. The fortified zone doesn't matter. All that matters is the clear hex, which is a bombardment terrain defense value of 1. So just to kind of show, we're going to do boom right there. So we're going to roll the die, and it's 4-to-1 odds. So basically, if we roll a 3 or higher, we're going to eliminate that 1-step non-replaceable mechanized unit, which has a Zoc. So it's really about clearing that Zoc. That's useful for us. All right, here we go. All right, we did roll a 3, so that is a DL1. So we lose a step. And this unit is permanently eliminated. We don't clear the fortified, and this unit is done. So that's all she wrote there. But now we don't have Zocs in our way, and we're projecting a Zoc into that hex, so those units that are trapped are still going to be trapped. Now we go down further south, and we have in Warsaw two different air units, one of which has a modifier, and each of these are going to get a shot. I think similarly, we want to try to just eliminate... we got some guys falling over. I think we want to try to eliminate... the mechanized units. Now, towns don't matter from bombardment. It's the other hex. So I think what we're looking at is a range of 12. So we can actually get decently far with this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That would be in range. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, okay. I think that's what we want to do. We want to eliminate these mechanized units because we don't want to deal with their strong capabilities. So I think we'll do this guy down here and this guy here, just so you can see. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. So we've got one here and one here. So here, it's another 4 to 1. We'll roll the die here. We rolled a 4. 4, that's eliminated, and the air unit is not done. So we'll put this back. This unit is gone forever. This isn't a huge deal for the Soviets because these units, I think, would go away anyway, eventually. Down now over here, the terrain is also clear. And we get, I think it's a +1. I need to see here. One of these has, yeah, +1 die roll modifier. So that's good here. So we're going to launch that attack. We've got a 5, so that's good to go. It's not done, so it goes back to base. And this unit is eliminated. So good turn with these guys. And then for our sort of Army Group South air units, some of these guys may have trouble. But I think, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And then here. Okay, so this one, both of these guys are in clear. We'll do the top one, rolling the die. 5, so eliminated. And the unit is not done. I think now we're on a roll here, guys. And then the secondary air unit, also a 5, so it's not done either. And now this unit's gone. And that's really important because what this is doing, this is clearing potential Zocs. Okay, so that was all for the 4th Panzer activation. Now we go to the 1st Panzer activation. So what we're essentially going to be trying to do is clear out more units if we can. Now the Northern Air Force is done, so we will not get to use them again. But we do get to use all the other ones, and what we need to try to do here is target units that we're not going to attack. So at least this activation, right? So that will matter more for the units we'll use in the south. For the what do you call it? Center, it won't matter as much. So let's see what's in scope for us. See, we do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, so this unit is going to go way up north to try to knock out a mech. And then what we'd like to do is clear things out a little bit if we can. So we'll just do over here. Okay, so you can see we're going to take out a mech that's in the north to kind of cover the one we couldn't get now with the north done. We're going to get this one just so these guys have a more clear path through. Okay, so the top unit, I believe this is still clear. Oh no, it is forest, and so now it's a defensive value of 2. So we're only going to be rolling on the 2 to 1 chart, but we do have a +1 on the die roll. Ooh! We got a 1, and that is a miss, and this unit is done, so that's too bad. This unit here, it's going to be in clear, and they're not done, and this unit is poofed. Didn't have a Zoc, but it's more just getting the unit out of the way if we can. And And then down here in the south, I think we want to try. Ooh, what's the city? What's the city provide? Bombardment of 4. Ooh. Yeah, I don't think it makes sense to take this guy out. We'd have to roll a 6, and I just don't see it happening, unfortunately. Yeah, that city's going to be tough. The best thing we might be able to do is just simply be besieging it, and that's as good as it will get. So what are our other options? Well, we've got this here and this here. Those are units that are ZOC enabled, but I wonder if we'll be able to get there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, so we're good. Both of these are in clear, and yeah, so we'll roll the die. Okay, 5 is all good to go, so this guy goes back to base. He'll be fine. This unit is eliminated. More mechs just poofed out of the way. Then down here, rolling 6, so it's good to go. Alright, air goes back. This unit goes poof. So we've now just taken apart a lot of these ZOCs that were in the way. And that's pretty important for what we're trying to do here. Wow. Yeah, that's pretty powerful stuff. So now it's a question of, what are we going to do with these units here? Are we going to attack and move, or move and attack? Well, I think attacking and moving probably makes the most sense, just because, again, we want to clear what's there if we can, and then move forward. So I'm going to take us off camera. I'm going to look at the first Panzer activations. I'll run through it. I'd love to take this out, but I don't think we're going to. We're going to have to wait for the logistics chit, which may mean we need to hold it a turn. So that could be a real detriment to the Axis advance. We'll have to see. So, okay, I'm going to take us off. I'm going to work through first Panzer activation. Okay, so I want to cover what we took care of here. I guess what I should probably do is start throwing down some control markers, because it's going to start to become relevant here as things get a little dicey. So we did end up taking Lvov. I'll mark the other VP place that we took. So now we're at 16 victory points. We were able to bust through, and then we moved after combat. Now we did take some losses, and I took a really gamble attack that was 1 to 2 odds. But I needed to take Lvov. If I didn't, then the Axis supply marker wasn't going to be able to move forward, and we'd have major issues later down the road. So I took that time then to make the sacrifice play, knock that out, and then we had a surge of units down forward. We're potentially putting all these guys out of supply, but it's right kind of here where they might be able to filter supply. But I'm going to have to look at the supply rolls when the logistics chit comes up, but needless to say, a lot of those units are just in rough shape anyway, so I think we're doing okay there. Again, the air power has just been super useful in knocking out those units with ZOCs, so that's going to enable us to, when we next get a real move chit, rock'em sock'em robots. So, okay, we're going to go to the chit. Now, we still have the Soviet counterattack chit to come up, and we'll see what happens. But logistics is going to come up any second. So, shake, 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 and what do we get? We get logistics. Okay, well, convenient. Alrighty, well, we're going to have to do logistics. Now, referring back to the special rules, all Axis units are in supply for turn 1. So I'm reasonably confident I just don't have to do the Axis logistics at all. But the rest of these Soviet units on the board, I will have to. Obviously, they're the ones that are trapped are likely out of supply, so we'll have to. I'm going to have to go through, check supply for everybody, and come back to recording once I've marked them all out of supply. So this is going to take some time. I'm going to go off camera and take care of that. When we come back, we should show all the supply states for the units. Obviously, anything that's getting gummed up by the Axis advance are going to have issues with supply potentially. We'll have to see. But so far, I will say we're doing reasonably well clearing out the way for our supply markers. Now, they couldn't be going as far as maybe they could be if I had done a little bit better, but so far I think we're making headway. So there's that goodness. So all right, we'll be back with the supply situation. Okay, we are back after calculating supply for all of our Soviet units. Again, Axis is in supply for turn 1, so they don't have anything to worry about. Okay, so Soviet lines of supply. So what do the Soviets need? Well, their supply sources are any rail hexes on the eastern map edge, okay. Military road hex on the south map edge going to the Caucasus, okay, that's way down towards the Caucasus. And then any road or rail hex leading to those hexes, those are going to be the supply sources. And the way supply is tracked in this game is sort of two different ways, right? You have a line of communication and a line of supply. So if you want to be in supply, you need a line of supply. And it's going to be a variable length that depends on which faction you are. Since we're only carried about the Soviets right now, we'll just talk about the Soviets. So they can trace a line of supply as long as they can count basically 5 hexes, a maximum of 5 hexes, back to that supply source. So as long as they can get to a railhead that has uninterrupted tracing back to one of those places, one of those ultimate supply sources, so to speak, if we were speaking in WIF terms, they'll be in supply. So 5 hexes to a rail that can go all the way back. Pretty simple. Line of communication is a little bit different. So line of communication, it can be an unlimited number of hexes, and what that just means is that you're going to be out of supply if you can't trace a line of supply, but you can trace a line of communication. And that means you're not isolated. But if you can't even trace a line of communication, which usually is how this will happen when you're surrounded by Zocs, typically, then you become isolated. When this is the case, basically out-of-supply units and isolated units have lower movement factors, so that becomes a problem. They have, basically, we get die roll modifiers, so it's going to be really easy to smash these units if we want to, as the Axis. And I forget if there's something worse for isolated. I'll have to see here. I know when we get to the end of the turn, there's going to be the attrition phase, and that's really what's going to be the tough thing. Need to see here what that might look like. I suspect it's going to be very harsh. I suspect it will be very harsh. 13.8. Let's just double checking that. Oh, okay. So I just did a double check. We're going to go through the effects here, but critically, or maybe not too critically, but this fortified zone goes away since it was out of supply when we checked the logistics. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, so basically the isolated units, if we leave them go, might simply evaporate. But we know that at the end of the turn, it's only a die roll, so it really could just end up being a total wash. So it may not be worth attacking where we can. We'll have to look at that. But just to review, what became isolated? Well, basically everything on these front lines became isolated. Easy because they're stuck up in Zocs. Zocs projected into these different areas Here, if I can get it right here, they were isolated because there's Zocs from that unit, Zocs from that unit, and it's just captured up. Whole bunch of isolation down there, but you'll see that these units right here are fine. This is because there are no Axis Zocs. There's Axis Zocs here, but not in these hexes, and that's really what's critical. So these units can count to these rail lines that go all the way back to a supply source. So they're in supply. They're sort of the last. The guys standing in front of the Pripyat marshes are good to go. And then we get some guys here. There's an isolated unit there due to Zocs. And as we head south, obviously, you know, there are a bunch of units that are not at quite the front line, so they're fine. But as we look down below here on that Hungary encirclement, this unit is isolated because of the Zocs here and here. It can't get anywhere. It is isolated. The units that are down here and here, what's really important is, due to the way the Zocs work, and the Zocs can be sort of deflected by allied units, each of these units here can count 5 hexes to rail line. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, rail line and safety. These are, right? But these units here along the Carpathian Mountains are out of supply. Why? So you know, obviously way out here it gets a lot harder to count to the lines that you need. And they can't get past enemy-controlled cities, so they got to count this way. But even here, so avoiding Zocs and whatnot, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 5, not to the rail line, right? So it's just too far for supplies to get to them. So they're out of supply, they're out of supply, they're out of supply, they're out of supply. They can't trace through here, and they can't, you know, it's, you know, basically neutral enemy territory. They can't get out here through that rail line, because any way that you try to trace it then, even going into enemy territory, those rail lines are going to touch Romanian units or German units or whatever. So all those guys are out of supply. No big deal there. So I think that's it for the logistics chit. Now, now the real question is, when the Axis gets to go, is there any point in attacking the already isolated units, or do we move on? It's a die roll to see who goes away. So most units may be removed. What we really need to do is make sure that the railways are clear for the supply depot. So there is actually a reason, I think, to attack, but what we'll probably do with those Panzers is attack and move. Attack and move. That's what we want to do. Clear what's behind us, surge forward to the next Soviet line of defense, and, you know, rinse and repeat. If I review just real quick our special rules, Romania, Hungary. I think we're okay. I think we're okay for everything else. We can, I think, go back to the. I think we can go back to the chit pool. Just checking a couple of things. Yeah, let me see here. Okay, yeah, I think we're good. Okay, I don't think I screwed anything up. I didn't move into the Odessa military district or anything, so I think I couldn't find anything specific about that, but I'm pretty sure I'm good. I haven't violated any rules, so we'll go ahead and pull the next chit. Now, the only chits left are some Panzer activations and the Soviet counterattack, so we will have to see what happens. The thing with the counterattack is we could try to move some Soviet units to potentially nullify Zocs and give supply back to a unit and make them not isolated, but they have to attack then, and the reality is they very likely aren't going to be able to do much, but we'll see. Alright, next chit is 2nd Panzer activation. 2nd Panzer activation. Our 2nd Panzer is, let's see, 1st Panzer, 2nd Panzer, oh, that's 3rd Panzer, 2nd Panzer, okay. And we're sort of back in this way, our activation bubble, just to kind of get to show you here. 3 hexes around that HQ that I sort of moved out. It's a little exposed, though it is sitting with the unit for defensive purposes. It's a little exposed, but we can activate a number of units that are nearby. So we can look at, again, either knocking out units and then moving on or something. We actually have a fair number of units in the command bubble, so we should be able to actually, if we wanted to, clear out a lot of these guys. Again, we may not want to wait for the end of the turn because they may survive due to the die roll depending on the rolls we have. I think it would be better we just clear out what we can and then we just surge forward again, creating a new line of attack for the future. So I'm going to take us off recording, I'm going to analyze the situation, and then when we come back I will show the aftermath of the 2nd Panzer. Now, we do have air activations we can make because we get a combat round. We'll have to decide where and how we want to conduct that, and I've got, I think, some units in mind around here, the in-supply units, that it would just be more convenient if I flushed them out of the way and took them out and then moved on. So I'll do the air off camera as well. We're getting to the point now where if I show you every single thing that I do, this video will be super duper long. So I'm just going to start picking up the pace here and showing the results as we go. I'm feeling a little bit better about the situation of the game now that I'm on a roll here. We're moving. I may not be moving as fast as I could be, which may be an issue later in the game. But we're doing okay. I think we're making some progress, and it's feeling good. We're feeling good. Okay, I will be back, and we'll see what happens. Okay, here's the aftermath of the 2nd Panzer activation. We knocked out some units. I decided to do those attacks, but we ended up losing a couple of units as the Axis, and I really don't like that because we can't afford to lose a lot. I had accidentally thought, oh, well, I lost a 2-step unit, and, well, no, it was one of the units that on the backside is an improved unit, mechanized Panzer Grenadier, and so I had to eliminate it. Though I don't think it was paired with a stack that had... Basically, I screwed up and it was too late to fix it, so whatever, I lost the unit. Now, what that did do is allow us to advance on the outskirts of Minsk. We also have another city sort of surrounded, and we've still got some isolated units over here that we'll probably knock out with the 3rd Panzer, and then we'll bring the rest of those units forward into action. I was able to use the air, and I knocked out a couple of these units that sort of barring the way here. So we've really opened up the path forward, so to speak. So we should be in pretty good shape to advance on the next move. And as soon as that 3rd Panzer comes up, we'll clear that fort there, and then that basically means we'll have access to our rail line. Looking at where our logistics units are, I think we're in pretty good shape to have some decent advancements for those. They may not be able to advance super duper duper far, but a reasonable distance for sure. Yeah, so we'll have to look at that. There may be some challenges in where all of the supply units, the supply depots are at right now. I'm going to have to double count. I might even have to swing one. I think that's the furthest south one. So, I would maybe go down here, but I don't know how to do that. So I'll have to look. It's like, does this situation right here screw me up? I'm really not sure. Really not sure about that. So that's going to be the difficult part. But okay, we're going to go to the chit pool. There's only 2 chits left. And we get 3rd Panzer. So the last move is going to be the Soviet counterattack, amusingly enough. So we have our 3rd Panzer. 3rd Panzer's here, supporting Army Group Center. Get that on camera up here in Army Group Center. So we'll get to activate sort of the units right around here we could probably knock out those last couple of isolated units there and start moving up. And, you know, the real difficulty is going to be how we want to proceed from here. Now, this might even be a situation where I would want to do a move in combat instead and do it so that I can clear the way for our supply a little bit better. But we'll have to see how it goes, I guess, because things are already kind of a weird, tight situation. We need to keep moving forward. So I'm going to take us off recording. I'm going to set up the go forward. We will get to use air attacks. Last turn, or last activation, we did lose use of one because we rolled badly, so we really only have a couple more left. And so, you know, I think at this point it's just a matter of working through what we got left to attack and move through. So I may end up using the air to knock out a couple of Russian units to clear, again, that rail path. That's really what's going to be the most important thing at the moment. So I'll take us off recording, and we'll come back after the third Panzer activation. Okay, here we are after the third Panzer cleared. We were able to very easily push away the isolated units and start to move ahead. And I started steering. You can't see it. I should probably put the HQs on top whenever possible. I started moving this HQ down here because I think we may need additional HQ support in Army Group South well, it's a difficult thing. We need multiple activations down on the south because we've got a lot of great terrain, but we also need plenty of activations on the north as well. But I think just as is, as I look around, get this guy on top. So we have like HQ in the north, HQ also in the north / center, HQ here, and then an HQ down here. I don't know. It's sort of a tough thing. Do you only have one HQ going south, or do you have them have two go south? See, that's the operational question. What I may do, I put the HQ down just because there's a lot of units clustered around here. But maybe next turn what I'll do is I'll make sure, you know, with this the HQ here, we activate these units, but we bring them north. We had to kind of finish off what was here, but now we can bring them back north, and maybe we do proceed east with just the one HQ. It's really tough to say because we want as many forces maybe pointed towards Moscow as we can, and figure that maybe we have enough forces out there to deal with taking Kiev. It's tough to say, honestly, but we've managed to, you know, knock out some more units with the air. We're clearing things open. We've got a lot of space to work with, but the only chit left now is the Soviet counterattack. So we're just going to pull that out of the cup. The turn's almost over, but we've got our counterattack. Now, the way that this is going to work is we're going to have to roll some dice. We're going to have to roll some dice to determine what happens here. So let me grab the rules. We're going to roll 2d6. This is as the Soviet player. Oh, man. Okay. Wow. I rolled an 11. So Stalin mandates me make 11 counterattacks. Oh, my God. The Soviet player is required to make at least the number of legal attacks at final odds 1 to 3 or better, each involving at least one in-supply Soviet Union. Soviet unit. I keep saying Soviet Union instead of Soviet unit. For each mandated counterattack the Soviet player fails to make, we have to eliminate a unit. Soviet rifle divisions adjacent to Axis units must be chosen if possible. If none exist, blah, 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 they have to be chosen instead. Yeesh. Well, so some things are going to be tough because we simply can't, we don't have enough units to move forward anyway. So, for instance, we have a lot of units that are in the back field. If they moved 4 spaces, they still couldn't get adjacent to an Axis unit, which means we can't activate them. We can only activate units that can actually get to Axis forces, and even then, they. Well, boy, this is going to be real complicated here, and they need to get to 1 to 3 odds, and we need to make 11 of them. So, our problem is we may not even be able to get that many. I'm trying to see. We can get maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think we can have our out of supply units down here eat some of those. Yeah, it says the Axis player. Oh, hold on a second. Okay, so this is kind of complicated. I don't think we can get too many units forward. The other problem is that we can't attack into or out of Romania, so really all these units down here aren't going to be able to be used. So we're going to have to figure something out here. But I think the out-of-supply units we may be able to eat, because they're doomed anyway. They're really screwed over, so we might as well try to make some attacks out of it. We might even eliminate some German units. And then elsewhere on the front where it makes sense, we can potentially do it. So I'm going to have to take us off camera to do this. It's going to take some time. What I suspect is going to happen is a whole bunch of Soviet units are just going to get destroyed in the counterattack. I don't have enough force composition right now that I can get units in the situation to do attacks, and we have to do it. We can't do single attacks. We have to double up wherever possible. This is going to be very difficult to figure out how to make this work. So I'm going to go through it. But it's going to be a real pain. It's going to be a real pain. So I'll be back. We'll talk about what happened afterwards when I'm done. See you in a second. Okay, so I hope I did this right, but this mandated counteroffensive was a freaking disaster. So we had to make 11 attacks, right? And we can't do it with single units, for the most part, anyway. And if I chose not to launch any attacks, or I are feeling like I can't, then I have to remove and supply units, and I have to pick the ones adjacent to Axis units first. So I kind of have to just eat a big load of bullshit, pardon my language, as the Soviets, and let me tell you what, it did not go well. Probably the only good thing that happened was that we got a unit down here, we eliminated a crappy, 1-6 German unit, and managed to make this unit not isolated when we get to the attrition phase. We were able to burn some of them off down here, but knowing that I can't attack with less than 2 units meant that I could only eat a few of those mandatory combats. But everywhere else, look what happened. Like, the entire path to Kiev is open. Minsk is now empty. So I had to make attacks with those units at Minsk, or I was going to lose them anyway. And what ended up happening was I rolled 1s, and attacker were eliminated, like, almost every time. There was a couple of times I rolled okay, but pretty much every result was either attacker loses a step or attacker eliminated. Riga is empty. It's real bad. It felt real bad as the Soviets. So I don't think that could have gone any worse. Basically, the Soviets got walloped this turn. I mean, that's sort of the expectation that they get walloped, but boy, that counterattack was not good. Not good. Okay, I'm going to take a quick break here because I got to get dinner started. But I'm going to come back and finish recording the end of the turn. So we're going to do attrition and do a quick little review of what's happened in the turn so far, and then we will come back probably in another video. So let me come back, take care of some stuff. I'll record a little bit more for this video. Be right back. Okay, we're back. I am still reeling from that nightmare of a counterattack. I mean, I think some of the problem was that I rolled very high and had 11, but minimum of 6. I guess if I had gotten the minimum of 6, I might have been able to eat some of those in some non-sequential areas. But just the rule about having to, like, if you don't attack, you have to get rid of the ones adjacent to Axis. We just were not well positioned as the Soviets for that. I mean, what a nightmare. That wasn't, like, in a gaming sense, that was a nightmare. We lost so many units. I think I lost almost, I lost a lot of non-replaceable units. I lost a lot of regular units. Right now, the dead pile, some of those counters there are the fortified zones, but like right there, those are the non-replaceables. Tossed them over there. The replaceables are a big old fat pile. Yeah, and the Axis have lost some. They've lost effectively 4 units. Not all of them are particularly scary in terms of units. So, yeah, I don't know. That was interesting. The next turn, July, will certainly be interesting. But now what we have to do is the attrition phase. So here is where the Axis depots may move. We are going to roll for movement on the depot advance table. We're going to roll for each depot. Though I think there may be a depot in... is there a depot? Yeah, there is a depot in Romania that's not going to go anywhere, I guess. But the rest of them will end up moving. So we're going to roll for each of those. I better make sure that I have all of the depots identified. So we've got one here, here, and really they should all be along the border, so it shouldn't be hard to find them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think the 6th one was in Romania. Let me just double check that. I'm reasonably confident that that's the case. I couldn't have moved them, so unless they're hidden under some other units. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6th one being in Romania. So yeah, okay. So we're going to roll a die, and the way this is going to work is, as soon as I find the right player A chart, as long as we don't roll a 1, they can move 6 spaces. Now, we may not want them to move 6 spaces, I guess is part of the problem. Let me double check the rule book here. I guess I would want to advance them as far as I could. But there could be issues with that, right? If I put them too far forward and then the enemy attacks, we might have to send them back. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to have to do that, anyway. Dang it. Come on now. I know I can find it. Da-da-da-da. Okay, I don't think I need, well, I do need a roll, but it's unlikely, unless I roll a 1, they're going to get to move 6 spaces. Yeah, so we're going to roll, they're going to move, that's 1 movement point to enter each rail hex. You can't move adjacent to a Soviet unit unless occupied by a friendly unit. Normally they enter enemy-controlled towns or cities. That shouldn't be a problem, because I think we moved units through when we activated, so that's not a problem at all. Okay. Yeah, I think it makes sense. If an enemy enters it, it simply relocates west along the rail line. So I think it just, you send it forward as much as you can, I guess. That seems to be the move to make here. There's no reason to hold back. So, all right. So we're going to roll for the northernmost supply unit here. We rolled a 3 plus 2 is 5, which means 6 hexes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, next one, which is located here. We rolled a 2, plus 2 is 4, is 6. Okay, excellent. So, probably want to do, whoops. Ooh, no. We can't move that one forward. We can move it up to here, but it has to stop because those units we didn't clear out of the way. That's going to be a problem. Okay, next one's here. We'll roll. All right, we get 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That works. Next one's down here. We roll. Okay, it gets to move 6. Do we send it north or south? That's the real question. I think we're going to have congestion problems. So I think I want to send it down south, honestly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then the last one that we can actively move, okay, gets to move 6, and we're going to do probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's not the best, but not the worst, because I think we want, in terms of the supply units, we want this one getting supply down here, we want this one getting supply up through here, and then the units over here, supply this way, supply this way, supply this way. And I think that's appropriate. We got to make sure that the south is well covered, because the southern advance, the southern flank, may be able to get the Axis to victory by getting into the Caucasus. So we want to make sure we have plenty of supply flowing through that direction. Now, if someone's played this game before and has any tips there, hey, I'm happy to have them at this point, because I'm just rocking what I got. Okay, so Axis Supply Depot advance is done. German air supply segment, there is no need for that. And now we have the attrition segment. So this is sort of the last one for the turn. All units marked isolated have their supply status rechecked. Units still isolated. Okay, units still isolated and adjacent to an in-supply enemy unit are eliminated. Otherwise, unit marked out of supply if it is now in supply or out of supply. I'm gonna have to reread that here in a second, because some of the wording there didn't make all that much sense. Okay. If the unit remains isolated and is adjacent to an in-supply enemy unit, okay. Otherwise, replace it with an out-of-supply marker. So this unit down in the south becomes out of supply. The rest of those guys they remain out of supply. And now for these isolated units, they are all still isolated. Yes, they're all still isolated. So now we are going to have to roll for them, because this is not a full attrition segment. Just let me get that going here. You have to look at the scenario rules just to make sure I do it right. A pocket is defined as a continuous group of any number of isolated units not separated from one another by empty hexes. So there's really only 3 pockets to speak of here. We've got this pocket, and we've got this pocket and that pocket. So we're going to roll a d6, and that is the number of steps immediately eliminated, non-owning player's choice in that pocket. Blah, 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 blah. And in some cases, we don't even need to roll. So if I look here, yeah, we don't need to roll. This unit is simply eliminated. Up here, yeah, I don't even need to roll. Simply eliminated. And we also get rid of the fortified zone. A lot of dead units. A lot of dead units. Okay, and then we have this pocket here, and technically there are 2 steps, one of which is a mechanized unit, and the other is an infantry. So we're going to roll a d6, and that's the number of steps. Now there's technically 2 steps there, so we need to roll a 2 or higher to completely remove the step. I rolled a 6. Okay, so these guys are gone. Eliminated. And both of them are non-replaceable. And that is it for the attrition phase. Now we go to the victory check phase. Well, we're at 16 victory points, if I've counted correctly, because we took Lvov, and we've taken Ventspils, but we've not advanced into Riga. We've not advanced into, though it's surrounded, Vilnius. I might have to look at that to see if control changes automatically. Though I think we still have to move into it. I think I screwed up. I think it was like that. I think I might have screwed up my... yeah, okay. Whatever. I think I screwed up my position there and cheated just now, and I can't remember what it looked like a second ago. I'll fix it later when I can review the footage. And I think that's it in terms of victory point hexes, or just those 2. But we have many that are well within reach. So we're going to pick up Vilnius, we're going to pick up Riga, we're going to pick up Vinnitsa, we're going to get Minsk, so that's going to net us 4 more, we'll be at 20. And, well, there will be more to come, I suspect, here shortly as we play through. Kiev is not that far away, all things considered, but we still got a rough situation to go yet. There's a lot of space to work with for the Soviets, even though they've been beaten up. Okay, so victory check segment is done. We're at 16 victory points, I believe. If it ever really matters, I'll make sure to count, but... we're in good shape. Then we have the turn advance segment, so we're going to flip all done air artillery units to available. So that's done. That's done. And that's done here, fixed up. We will get to move these air units, I believe, at the beginning of the next turn. Yeah, and we advance the turn marker. So we'll be going into turn 2 in, I think, the next video, because I've recorded quite a lot of content. This video is going to be quite long, so I apologize for that, but I think it was important to kind of run through a real turn here and show you as we go what was the situation. I'm going to stop recording here for just a second. I'm going to come back, because what I want to do is I want to review, I want to go find an online video or a map or something. And I want to find out, so okay, here's the beginning of July 1941. How far along was the real axis? And let's see how I'm comparing at the moment. Again, I mean, you could almost consider like this white, this negative space here. I'll very swiftly move up through there at the beginning of July. So, but as it stands, I'm just sort of at a Riga to Tarnopol line, which, we'll have to see. So I'll be right back. Okay, so I just took a look at some historical videos on YouTube, just because that's the easiest resource for me to double check, to say, okay, well, by July 1st, where was the axis in terms of their advance? And I'm pretty close to the historical setup. So if I were to define my advance as, you know, as far as, we'll say, you know, Tarnopol-ish. So Army Group South actually is about spot on. I might be, you know, my units are kind of scattered a little bit differently than where the historical units probably were, but I'm pretty close. I'm pretty close to where the historical axis was for Army Group South, so no big deal. I probably have too many units bunched up here in front of the Pripyat Marshes than was historical, but, you know, whatever. Now, in center, Army Group Center and South, Center by this point had kind of just about taken Minsk, and I think in the very first activation of this coming turn, the Axis will take Minsk. So I'm probably about on schedule, and then similarly, we're just about to take Riga, and basically be bumping up along this line, which would be roughly historical. So I guess you know, I'm maybe like a couple of days behind schedule of the historical extent, if you want to look at it that way. You know, not terrible for a first run. Of course, you know, even if I was on track, you know, the Axis lost the war. So I don't know how valuable that is. But we made decent progress. We eliminated a lot of units, and now we're going to be able to surge forward. And I think it's a realistic possibility that we could take Kiev in this coming turn. It's a possibility. I don't know that we're going to get near Moscow. I think if we pushed as hard as we can get, we might be able to get to Smolensk. But I just don't see Moscow as being feasible. But you know, we'll have to see. Things are a little disorganized. I may have left too many units behind, and we've got to try to pull them up. So hopefully the Axis. I haven't looked at the action chit schedule, but hopefully we get a nice movement chit, and we can just bring everything and form a new front line that will probably run something like this on down to Kiev, and we'll actually be able to start using our Romanian units. What we probably will need to do is swing a few units down around and try to pocket these Odessa units a little bit and cut them off and remove them, and hopefully take Odessa. So that's going to be sort of an additional punch we're going to have to make and work our way through. But the air has been great so far, and I suspect the air will continue to be awesome. So, okay, well, that was turn 1. We will look at doing turn 2 in the next video. What I may try to do then is do 2 in an expedited fashion so that I can also cover maybe turns 3, maybe even 4 in the next video, and try to get through multiple turns of video. Again, I wanted to kind of talk through each play-by-play so that you guys can kind of see the way the game goes. And obviously, you know, the Soviets right now aren't putting up a great fight, but that will change in time. So thank you for watching. If you like this video, hit like. If you'd like to see more of this content, if you want to keep watching this series, hit subscribe if you haven't already. And we will catch you next time. So take care and keep on gaming.